Welcome to the Noir Poise podcast, where wisdom is power is more than just a motto.
It's our way of life. While we don't claim to have all the answers, we're dedicated to delving deeper into different topics through meaningful conversations. As a duo, we bring different viewpoints to the table, enriching our joint journey towards growth and poise.
Join us as we explore and unlearn to relearn while striving to navigate life with poise. You know how they say, as you get older, you become your parents?
Yep.
Do you feel like that's the case for you?
I'm going to put my pride aside and say, absolutely, that's true.
Yeah. So as I'm getting older, I mean, I always notice things about myself that I obviously know where it comes from. I'm like, okay, clearly that's my mom. But the older I get, the more I notice even small things like the way I may choose to stand or a comment or a reaction that I have to something. And recently, even the way I laugh. And I didn't always laugh like this. So what made me realize that was hearing our daughter laugh the same exact way. And I literally looked at her as she was laughing. And I was like, you laugh like your grandmother. Not even...
Not even she laugh like you.
Yeah, exactly. Not even saying like, you laugh like me. No, I immediately went, she laughs like my mom. And then literally like a few days later, I laughed at something and I caught myself laughing the same exact way. And I kid you not, I stopped mid-laugh. I stopped mid-laugh and went into like deep thought. I was like, what the heck? So it's an unfortunate truth that we somehow, some way become our parents.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that you'll find yourself doing one thing. It could be something major or some of the minor things you just mentioned, but as you grow older, you'll start to see yourself either acting or reacting like them.
Yeah. I'm not okay.
Because even when you think about it, both our parents are conservative. So growing up, there are certain things everyone our age was watching, whatever we wanted to watch, but they would always say no. Yeah. And in my opinion, at that time, they would react to the most basic things in the most extra way.
Like Power Rangers.
Like Power Rangers growing up, they thought it was demonic. And even though we don't watch TV like that, of course, if we're on YouTube, we're checking out a clip or something, we get ads. I found myself reacting to those ads the same way my parents reacted to
the things you used to watch.
The things I used to watch. So I think it's inevitable where you'll eventually find yourself reacting or acting like your parents.
Man, I've had a hard time accepting that over the years because, of course, like I said, there's certain things like I've always knew. I'm like, yeah, little things here and there. I'm like, I know I get that from my mom, or the way that I think sometimes. I know it's from her. The way I may want things in particular ways. I'm like, yeah, that's from her. But it's hitting me different now because I have a child. And I'm watching my child mimic a lot of things that I do. And it's a lot of things that I do that I don't like. And I'm watching her do it, and I'm like, damn. Out of all, you hear me say this all this, I'm like, out of all things for you to take, like, why that? But that's life, though. Yeah. We take things that we observe, and sometimes it's just in our DNA.
But why do you think that is, though?
What? That it irritates me?
No, that we find ourselves eventually becoming our parents, no matter how hard we may try not to.
I think multiple reasons. We've discussed this before. we become what we see. And our entire lives, who did we watch? Our parents.
Yeah.
So you already have their DNA, right? We already have their DNA within us. So even if we weren't around them, there's certain things that we would inherit naturally because they're our parents. We have the same genes. And when you add that along with watching how they act, watching how they may say certain phrases, it happens to me all the time. Like I could say a simple phrase in Creole and my friends would be like, yo, you sound just like your mom. And I'm not the only one. Like everyone I know, it's the same situation. Like they'll say certain things and I'm like, oh my God, you sound just like your mom. And it's happening more and more as I'm aging, I'm noticing.
Something I had to struggle with is understanding whether I'm becoming like my parents because that's who I was exposed to, or maybe I'm just finally seeing things the way they saw it. Maybe all these years they were right and I'm just now finally seeing it.
I think to some extent, yeah. I think it could be both. I don't think it's always the case, though. I think there are certain things where, you don't realize certain things until at a point where you're experiencing it. We've heard them say things like that all the time. Wait till you become a mom. Wait till you become a dad. When you're a parent, you'll understand. When you're an adult, you'll understand. And there's truth to that, for sure. But I do think a lot of it is learned behavior.
Yeah.
We talk about this all the time. When we realize that we don't like it, we have the ability to change it.
Yeah.
But it's all about making that choice to do so.
I think everyone is born subconsciously looking for a hero. It's kind of like you ever remember yourself, maybe it's the first day of school or first day in gym class or exposed to anything that you're unsure of. Naturally, you look across the room and the person who seems like they know what they're doing,
you mimic
that's
it.
who you mimic. And I think subconsciously when we're born, we do exactly that.
Yeah.
And it could be why, in my opinion, when there's a second child that's born or a third child, the oldest sibling kind of becomes like the parent.
Yeah.
Like you'll see that
The younger
the
sibling
middle
is
or the younger siblings won't necessarily mimic the parents or become like the parents, but they'll mimic the older ones because they see the older one as, okay, I think you're a little bit more reliable and I could copy or mimic you.
Yeah.
So I think everyone is born looking for some kind of mentor or a hero. And to some extent, there's a lot of positives that come out of it. I can think of a couple things that I watched or observed my parents doing that I find myself doing that I'm like, you know what? I'm glad that I learned or observed them doing that. For example, they were always very generous people. And I think because I was exposed to that, I, not just myself, but my siblings grew up being very generous people.
Same.
So we're all like sponges. And unfortunately, if you put a sponge in a sink that has soap and dirty dishes, guess what? The sponge is going to pick up the soap and the bacteria.
Yep.
And that's how people are.
I love that. That's so true. I feel like we always focus on the negative things that we pick up from our parents, not realizing we've picked up also our good tendencies from them too. Like you were born good, bro.
Yeah.
Like these characteristics that are great about you, you didn't just pick them up yourself. Like that stems from them too. So we got to give credit where credit is due. But identifying those things, I think, is a biggie because for me, like I said, I always realized growing up what I pick up from my mom. I even knew exactly what I did that was intentionally done like her. But now as an adult, I found my own identity. I'm doing things my own way. I think that's where it hits hard, where you're trying so hard to just be who you want to be and you still start to pick up little things and sometimes someone else has to pick it up or tell you.
It especially becomes a problem when you watch yourself do things that you criticize them for.
Yes. I've lived that because there's so much, even the term criticize. I come from being heavily criticized. And I found that in my adulthood, I often criticize. And I had to take accountability and recognize that that was where it stemmed from because that's what was done to me in hopes, and not in like a negative way. I don't think it was done like intentionally to break me down or anything. I think it was more so she had high expectations of me. She expected nothing but the best. Therefore, she criticized until I gave the results that she expected from me. And while her intentions were good, it had negative effects. And I found that I was doing that. And I think we had a conversation where you felt like I was like OD critical of you. And that's when it was kind of like a wake up call that I was mimicking the same actions that I experienced. That's one of the big things for me in adulthood is recognizing things like that, especially as a mom now, because you don't want to mimic those type of behaviors. So identifying the inherited behaviors, whether it's inherited or learned, but identifying those habits, those traits, those behaviors that are unwanted, and then being able to move forward in changing those behaviors is important.
Yeah. The hardest thing to overcome is the things that you want to overcome, but has been built into your foundation. Because naturally you start to revert back to it. Like kind of like what you said with the criticism.
Yeah.
Because it sounds harsh that, you're critical, but realistically, when you criticize, it wasn't for the sake of criticizing. It was for the sake of improving.
Right. It was constructive criticism.
Right. It was constructive
but it's criticism
but
nonetheless.
It's still criticism. Yeah, nonetheless.
Yeah.
So something like that is extremely difficult to get over because you would kind of have to sacrifice your desire to see things improve. And you've expressed that to me before.
That's literally what happened. Yeah.
There are times where I've done something, or if someone has done something, or maybe even you yourself have done something, you see how it could be improved. Like with everything in life, nothing's perfect, but you had to hold back.
Right.
Because of the criticism.
Yep.
And similarly with you, where there's a lot of things that I observe within my own actions that I noticed stem from my childhood or stem from my parents and how they behave. For example, my parents are very comfortable people. You say, I think you made a comment before that they always seem so happy.
Yeah.
And
it's a great thing though, because I don't
thing.
come from that, but
right. It is a great thing. And I didn't notice it was a problem until we started talking about our future. I felt that the way I grew up, I would have no issue at the time spending the rest of my life that way.
yeah, it's crazy.
And it's not because I couldn't see better for myself, but it's because I was comfortable.
You were content.
I was content. And I noticed that in life, my biggest victories came after I was forced into an uncomfortable position. That made me question, why is it that I have to be put into an uncomfortable position in order to grow?
That's growth, literally.
Yeah, definitely. But
yeah,
what I've shared with you is I want to be in a position where I'm always learning. I'm always looking to grow without having to be forced to grow.
I see what you're saying.
But
okay,
that's something that I had to unlearn because after each victory in life, I just want to chill.
You're like, let me just celebrate this win. Let me sit in this happiness real quick.
Right.
I get that.
Let me sit in this happiness, and naturally, I want to sit for a long time.
Yeah.
But then something would happen, and I would always tell myself,
how did I end up here?
How did I end up here? Right. But that stemmed from me observing or learning that you should be content with whatever you have, which again is a good thing, but like everything, there's a positive and there's a pro and there's a con. So when I realized that, it took a lot of work to unlearn that. Like I felt like I had to almost step out of myself. I think
we're still unlearning that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we had a conversation similar, like maybe a couple months ago, where we're in a good space right now, thankfully. And because I come from a critical background, it's not until you just said what you said, I had this thought. I always thought it was more so like perfecting how I decorate things, how I clean things, or how I do things. I never really took it as, I never really applied it to maybe that's why I'm always looking to grow. Like nothing is ever good enough. While it's good and I'm grateful, it's just not enough. Whenever I'm able to attain something, it lets me know that I can then get more and do more. And again, as you were saying that, it made me realize like, maybe that's why I am that way. I remember you said that to me where you're just like, well, how much money is going to be enough?
Yeah.
Or how much that we do is going to be enough? How big does the house have to be? And while it doesn't have to do with the size of the house or the amount of money, for me, it's all about constant growth because we've learned if you don't keep growing, life will continue to keep advancing without you. And that's how you end up in positions where you now are forced to grow because you weren't moving ahead with time. So time is moving ahead and you're remaining stagnant. So naturally what's going to happen is now you're at the bottom of that trend line and you have to do a lot of work to get to where you need to be at that point in time.
Yeah.
So the way I see it is let's keep on elevating and growing slowly and making progress. So when we do get to a certain point of success, we're not just, ooh, that was great. Let's sit in this success. It's like, okay, cool. Let's enjoy the success. Let's celebrate it. Let's acknowledge it. But let's start working on the next thing.
Right. But I'm not gonna lie, it's difficult to learn even
the
those
opposite of what you're used to.
behavior.
Yeah.
Like and what I was gonna say is oftentimes I felt like I had to step out of my own body to motivate myself to say something to the extent of, remember what happened last time you got comfortable. Don't get too comfortable. But my natural state after a victory or after completing a task is to revert back to that. And I'm sure everyone could relate because you do whatever's comfortable to you.
Yeah.
You do whatever comes natural to you.
Right.
And unless you're taking the active steps to be mindful of all your actions, you're going to always revert back to those unwanted behaviors.
Right. That's so true. But what I love about that is we balance each other, thankfully, because I think there's great points on how you grew up and what you come from. And I think there's great points on how I grew up and what I come from. But the problem is if you're too left or too right, it's a problem.
Yeah.
So I think, thankfully, in our case, we come from different backgrounds and it allows us to meet in the middle and there's some form of balance. So I think that's good. But in unlearning unwanted behaviors, it's important to be attentive to your choices that you're making and then replacing those patterns that you're used to with new intentional patterns. So in the case that you just said, I'm used to constantly, okay, let's do more, let's do more, let's do more. And you're used to, we got what we wanted, let's be grateful and sit in this, we're comfortable. And it can easily get to a place on both sides where it's ineffective or it causes a negative effect. But in recognizing that we both deal with those patterns, we both have to make a conscious decision in all of the choices that we make in order to create a new pattern. So in your case, I'm constantly reminding you, all right, these are our goals. Just because this is not a goal we're trying to meet next month, we got to plan it out now. And that's how we can take 3-4 trips in a year because we're planning it out in advance. And with you, you remind me to make patterns that I don't have to keep on focusing on what's the next best thing because that can easily get to a space of being unhappy and being unsatisfied. So it's all about creating new patterns and then being intentional with those decisions that you make when it comes to those new patterns.
By patterns, you mean habits, right?
Yes. Yeah. Habits, behaviors, but in your day-to-day decisions, like being conscious about what you're doing rather than falling into what comes naturally to you. Because if you're falling into what comes naturally to you, it's probably what you observed your parents do.
Yeah. I'm glad that you said day-to-day because that's literally what it's going to take to rewrite your behavioral script.
Right.
It's day-to-day actions. I don't remember exactly where I saw this, but it was something to the extent of it takes, I think it's like 90 days to form a habit.
Yeah.
Or something to that extent.
Yeah.
So if you do something for 90 days consistently, you're naturally going to be inclined to do it. Mm-hmm. I had to realize that with me being comfortable, it's a daily task. Mm-hmm. Or another thing that I picked up, and it could be because of our culture, is, and again, I don't mean this in any offensive way, but I had to realize that I lacked a lot of discipline. Mm. And when I say discipline, I mean I may have one set of rules today, another set of rules tomorrow, another set of rules after that. Like
based on how you feel.
Based off how I feel. And the reason why I think it's cultural is because I've seen my parents do it, and I've seen people within our culture do it as well, where they have a set of rules, but then for their cousin, guess what? They're going to bend that rule.
Yeah.
For
it's
a
flexible
friend,
depending on who it is,
it's
when it is.
Depending on who it is. Like, I remember one time we were giving food out at church, and they announced the rules that this door is a door to come in and get your food, and you have to exit through another door. So it would just flow naturally. Mm-hmm. Of course, if you're Haitian, you know how that goes.
No one follows.
No one follows. Well, I
They
would
just
say
want the food. They
most
come in
people,
and however they
I would
want.
say maybe 75% of people followed, but there were that 25%.
The people who didn't know the servers.
Right.
Basically.
And I remember that my sister and I were in charge of guarding the door. We did not care who was knocking on
Soup
that
Kitchen?
door. No, this wasn't Soup Kitchen. This
Oh,
was actually
okay.
the elders doing this.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
So we did not care who was knocking on the door. I think we were actually a little too mean about it because we were laughing at certain people that were, telling us like, open the door right now.
Yeah.
Trying to get special favor. We didn't care because we're like, these are the rules. Mm-hmm. My father came in. Someone knocked on the door. He opened the door. What is it that you wanted me to get for you? Okay, I'll get it for you. Next person came in, same thing. A third person came in, same thing. Finally, my sister and I threw our hands up. That door came open.
Yep. It was like, what's the point?
And it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm saying that is I found that that's how I behaved in life, where I would establish a set of rules, and one day I may follow them to the T. The next day I'll make excuses because of, maybe I'm too tired or I had a rough day. I'm going to cut myself some slack.
Yeah,
and
it's easy to get there.
it naturally made me undisciplined. Mm-hmm. Because of that, this is something I tell myself every day when I wake up is, how are you going to practice discipline today?
I love that.
It's difficult. I'm not saying I'm perfect with it, of course, but it's a daily reminder because these unwanted habits, you have to work on them daily.
I love that you said that because in unlearning unwanted behaviors, one of the things that you have to do is you'll find yourself reparenting yourself. I actually found this article that stated that these were the 4 pillars of reparenting yourself. Discipline was listed as number 1.
Look at that.
That's why I was like, what are the odds that you said that? But discipline, self-care, joy, and emotional regulation.
Discipline, self-care, joy, and emotional regulation.
Yeah, so those are the 4 pillars in reparenting yourself. Even in a situation where you are disciplined, and I'm going to use working out as an example. You know how I feel about like physique and body image and working out and being healthy. So for me, I've always tried to implement it in my life. I've gone through different stages where maybe I was doing it in the form of like I'm in track or I'm doing, some other type of activity, or it was I'm going to the gym 3 times a week. There were seasons in my life where I was going 5 times a week. There were seasons where I'm like, okay, I'm doing Pilates now, or maybe I'm doing cycling, but there's always been a form of working out for me. And I've always tried to be disciplined in it, even if it wasn't as much as I would want to be. But I've always tried to maintain a form of working out, even if I was working out at home, just so I can continue to keep being disciplined in doing so. And for a long time, because my body was so used to it, I got to a point where the days that I didn't work out, I felt disgusting. I was like, I gotta do something. I gotta work out. Like I have to make plans to get to the gym. I even got a trainer at one point. I was going to Pilates class at like 6 a.m. because I'm like, I gotta do it in order to make myself feel good, or you know what I mean? And even in being disciplined in that way, I stopped for a couple weeks and completely fell off. So that's just to show you that even in being disciplined, you stop doing it for a short period of time, your body will naturally revert to what you don't want it to do. And I say that because I think it's the same in unlearning unwanted behaviors. We often think that, it's a 90-day rule, or it'll take about a year, or maybe it'll take a couple weeks. I've learned that with things like that, you can't put a time frame on it. You just have to actively make a decision every single day to keep on working on it until you don't even have to think about it anymore. Because you can work on something for like a year, and the minute you fall off, you will revert back to your natural state. Yeah. So in unlearning unwanted behaviors, it is constant. We've spent our whole lives watching our parents. And again, we have their DNA. Yeah. So if you're not constantly working to improve the areas that you don't want within you, you're going to revert back. It's you're naturally going to go back to what you're used to. So for me with the critical thing, if I'm not consciously thinking every day how I'm communicating with people, did that come off the wrong way? It will go back to what I'm used to, because that's my natural state, is to be like, well, maybe you should have done it this way. Or maybe this color could have worked better. Or you know what I mean? Like, I will go back to being critical and not recognize it, even critical on myself. Because as much as like I'm critical on others, I find that I'm even more heavy critical on myself, where it's unhealthy. This is something like I deal with regularly, where I'm always trying to perfect things that are unrealistic to even perfect. And I have to still make a conscious decision every day. And mind you, I've been working on this for years. I have to make a conscious decision even now when I may make a comment or I make a statement. I'll go back and think about it and be like, should I have said that? Maybe I should rephrase it. And it becomes so annoying, but it has to be done when you're naturally a certain type of way.
I love that you said not to put a time constraint on yourself, because I actually learned that when you're looking to achieve a goal, the worst thing you could do is put a time limit on yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
Because now you automatically have something working against you. It should just be something natural.
Right.
And again, with discipline, I had to accept the fact that discipline is not something you have, it's something you practice.
Yes. I remember you said that to me the other day. That was deep.
Because what I would notice would happen to me is I would create a plan for something. I would stay on task with it. I would think I'm disciplined, and then I would fall off. Like with working out, as you know, of course.
Yeah.
You'll say I work out in seasons. And it's because I set a plan and I say, okay,
I'm going to do this for this amount of time.
For
so true.
2 weeks, I'm going to work out every day for 30 minutes or an hour or 15 minutes, whatever it might be. And I stick with that plan. And I get to a point where I'm like, I'm disciplined. I know I'm going to do it. And then it just falls off. So this is what I tell myself. It may sound silly, but just like you get up in the morning and you don't say to yourself, my teeth is brushed. No, you get up and brush your teeth. Discipline works the same way, where don't get up in the morning and say to yourself, I have discipline, but rather say to yourself, how am I going to practice discipline today?
Or both. Because the manifestation of words is important too, in my opinion. But I get where you're coming from. I was taking it a little too far, but you know, there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with saying I am disciplined, but it's all about following it up with the action. Right. So the practice would be the action, in my opinion.
Because I think it's all about not putting the pressure on yourself to change within a certain time frame. And the reason why I was about to interject is, if you're telling yourself I am disciplined, then what if one day you fail? Are you then not disciplined? And when you say I am disciplined, you automatically create that battle in your mind, because you just proved today that you're not disciplined, but you're claiming to be disciplined. That's why I wanted to interject, but I totally...
That's a whole different topic.
I totally...
I get what you're saying, though.
There's actually a study or science behind this. It's called epigenetics, which is the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. So science is starting to explore that now, how literally your environment can impact your genes, impact the way you just react to things, which is, again, why we find ourselves becoming like our parents, no matter how hard we try sometimes not to. It's your environment. Your environment literally taught you to behave a certain way.
I love that you said that, because I was actually going to mention the importance of paying attention to your environment in the process of reparenting yourself, because sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves, not realizing that we're in the wrong spaces. So I think it's important to pay attention to your environment when you're trying to reparent yourself, according to whatever it is that you're trying to unlearn in that moment, and slowly progress in letting yourself be in those type of environments again, because you may be triggered, bro.
Yeah, that's deep. A lot of times we think we can change without changing our environment.
No.
And I'm not saying that's impossible, but you have to be prepared to work 1,000 times harder.
Yeah. To use an example, like with gardening, I love gardening, and sometimes you have to move a plant to a different soil in order for it to grow and prosper. There could be instances where it's the same soil, But if you move it to a different location, it'll thrive better because there's more sun there, or there's more shade there, depending on the plant, whether it likes shade or sun. And I see us the same way. Sometimes we think it's us as the plant, and it could be the soil.
That's deep.
It could be the amount of sunlight that you're getting, which is, the people or the places that you're exposing yourself to. Sometimes you have to lift yourself up out of the current location, put yourself in a different location in order to reroot yourself, build a better foundation, and thrive. And after a certain point, you can then go back to that and be healthy enough to be able to deal with it. And it's the same with plants. You can then move the plant back to the previous location, but after it has built enough roots to withstand itself in those harsh conditions, it will now be able to continue thriving.
I love that. And that's the importance of, like we always say, asking questions, understanding the foundation of things.
Right.
Like, you can know your mom is critical. You can know that you're critical yourself, but unless you know the why, which, using your example with the plants, unless you know that maybe this plant is not getting enough shade, maybe this plant is too close to another plant that's counteracting it. Unless you know the why, you won't know where to move it to.
Right.
And that's the importance of asking these questions, or doing a lot of self-reflection, or not just stating the what, because a lot of times I feel like, especially with our parents, and again, shout out to the parents out there. I know it's not easy. We're parents, and one day we may have to face the same type of music.
Yeah.
But that's the importance of asking questions and trying to figure out, why was your mom critical? Or with my parents, why were my parents so comfortable or over generous? Finding out the reasons why, so that you know, metaphorically speaking, where to move, what soil to move to, or where to move yourself, how to change your environment so you're not then repeating the same process, but just in a different location.
Right. Yeah. So moving away from your inherited script is definitely a challenge. And I feel like we're all going through this right now as adults. Like, you get to a certain point where you're just like, it's almost like you're rewriting your behavioral script, because you start to notice things about yourself in your early adulthood, and you're like, all right, I got to change this now, or I have to prevent myself from doing it to the next generation. In order to do so, there's no other way but to figure out, like you said, the foundational issues, and then starting that process of rewriting that script, so you don't then transcribe it right onto your children, and it's a continuous cycle. We've been discussing breaking cycles the last episode. Go listen to it if you haven't. The previous episode, we talked a lot about breaking cycles and understanding them. And I feel like that's one of the things you have to do first. You have to understand in order to then rewrite. There's going to be so much obstacles and challenges that are encountered in the process of rewriting your behavioral script. Like, for me, when it comes to, same example, the critical thing, I'm now a mom where I'm aware of it, and I'm making sure I don't do it to my child or to anyone around me, even with you or my sister or whoever it may be. I try my best to not be critical, and also not be as critical with myself, which is a work in progress every day. But one of the challenges for me now is trying to do that while still getting criticized. I think that's one of the things that we may encounter in the process of, like, reparenting ourselves and rewriting our behavior, is your parents are still in your lives for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So these things that you're trying to change about yourself that you get from them, 9 times out of 10, they're still doing those things towards you, or you're still witnessing those things. Finding a balance on how to work on you and progress while still being exposed to how they do those things that you're trying to do. And I know we just discussed, like, changing your environment, but we have to be honest that most people, it's your parents. How much can you change that environment? You can try to distance yourself or avoid certain conversations, but the reality is, they're your parents. They're still in your lives. You're probably still going to hear things here and there, or witness things here and there. For me, that has been one of the most challenging things.
It's an ongoing battle.
I've heard a friend say this, where it's just like, how much growing do I need to do? And I feel her. I really do. It's just like, dag, yo, it's like a constant battle. It's the minute you feel like you've improved on something, there's always something else that you're just like, oh, dag, now this, now, oh, dag, now this. But that's part of evolution. That's part of progression and not repeating certain cycles, not doing the same things our parents did, not being stagnant. We have to face uncomfortable situations, as annoying as it is. That's one of the things we're learning to accept now, that these uncomfortable situations are intended to help us in our progression, in our journey of life.
And the great thing is, it's always worth it.
Always. It doesn't feel like it in the moment.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be real. But down the line, when you look back, you're just like, oh, look at that. I done got far.
Yeah.
Thankfully. Yeah, it's always worth it. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope you gained some knowledge today that'll promote poise in your life. We have new episodes uploaded every Thursday right here, same place, same time. Until next time, you can follow us on Instagram at Noir Poise Podcast to stay connected. That's NOIRPOISED Podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback.
And remember, your wisdom is power.